In the first time I lived alone, in a rented apartment, I went through a terrifying experience that made me believe ghosts truly exist. After finishing my student life, I found a job in Osaka Prefecture through Job Pina's hunting activities, so I left my parents and started living on my own. At the time, I was sent to another location for training, which meant I had to find my own place to stay. This was my first step into society. Being in my early 20s, I didn't have much money and certainly didn't qualify for a comfortable lifestyle, so I decided to look for the cheapest apartment possible. Even though the company covered 60% of the rent, I still wanted to save as much as I could, so I chose an old building that was already more than 40 years old. It was a 2-story rental property with 10 rooms in total, and it looked extremely worn down. I rented a unit with a 6-tatami main room and a 4-tatami side room. The rent was only 40,000 yen. Although it was old, it was my first castle of my own, so I decided to start my new life with that mindset and work hard for the next few years. The days that followed were spent commuting between the apartment and my workplace with almost no free time, so when I returned to the apartment, I would just sleep. Half a year passed in the blink of an eye. One day off, a university friend came to visit me. We decided to spend a relaxed day at my place. I went to the station to pick him up, and we walked together to the apartment building. He looked up at it and immediately appeared uneasy. He said he had a bad feeling, that something inside made him extremely uncomfortable, so he stopped walking and refused to step inside. I laughed it off, telling him he was being too sensitive and overthinking things, then coaxed him into the building. But once we were inside, he started saying strange things again. He claimed someone was staring at him, that something was there. At first I thought he was joking and that his imagination was running wild. I told him not to worry about it, and we stopped talking about those things. He stayed at my place for about 2 hours before heading home. That night, around midnight, I lay in bed getting ready to sleep. It was a very hot summer, and the apartment had no air conditioning, so I had the fan on. Just as I was about to drift off, I heard the sound of the fan mixed with what seemed like footsteps on the floor. I felt as if someone was there. I immediately opened my eyes and turned my head to look, but there was no one. I thought I must have misheard. Yet every time I closed my eyes, the sound returned, and every time I turned to look, it stopped. This happened several times. I started feeling deeply uneasy and nauseous, so I turned my face the other way, toward the window. The moment I did, I saw the shadow of a long-haired woman reflected on the curtain. In that instant, terror shot through me. I screamed and dove under the covers. My legs went weak. My heart pounded wildly, and I was overwhelmed by a fear unlike anything I had ever felt before. While I was still gripped by that terror, I suddenly felt someone on top of the blanket, trying to pull it off me. I clutched the blanket tightly from inside, refusing to let it be torn away. This tug-of-war lasted for more than 2 hours. Eventually, exhausted, I must have fallen asleep without realizing it. The next morning when I woke up, I wondered when I had finally drifted off, but the memory of the previous night came rushing back immediately. I stared quietly at the spinning fan, once again sinking into that same horror. Then I remembered what my friend had said about feeling uncomfortable. He must have really sensed something supernatural. For a long time afterward, I couldn't sleep with the lights off. Whenever I recalled that experience, my body would turn ice cold and sweat would break out on my face. I never wanted to go through anything like that again. This next story is something I heard from my husband. When he was in his 20s, he didn't want to become a corporate slave, so he took the money he had saved from part-maintenance time jobs and used it to modify a car. Then he opened a small coffee stand at the foot of a mountain in Kyushu. The stand faced a gravel parking lot that could hold several cars. Every morning he would drive there at 6 o'clock to prepare for business. From 7 onward, joggers and commuters passing by would stop for coffee. Around 11, he would take a 1-hour break. At that time, the only sounds nearby were the chirping of insects and the radio playing in his car. While he was cleaning up his work area inside the car, He suddenly heard footsteps on the gravel path in the distance. He wondered who was coming. Since friends had sometimes dropped by after closing time before, he assumed it might be one of them. He set down what he was doing and looked out the window. Outside was pitch black. The gravel parking lot showed no sign of any car pulling in, and there was no one there. He found it odd but didn't think much of it, figuring he must have misheard. So he went back to work. But as he continued tidying up, he heard the footsteps again. This time they were heading straight toward him and sounded much closer. From the sound of it, there seemed to be 2 or 3 people walking. He looked up toward the window and called out, asking who was there. It received no response, so he stared carefully outside, but there was still no one there. The whole situation felt eerie, and a chill crept over him. He sped up, hurrying to finish packing. He was halfway through when a man's voice suddenly rang out from somewhere just in front of his cart. "Sir, do you have any Japanese sake, cola, or milk tea?" The sudden voice startled him, but then he thought, so there really is someone here, and he relaxed a little. He answered brightly, "Sorry, we're already closed," while lifting his head to look out. When he did, he saw 3 figures standing not far from his cart window, a man, a woman, and a small boy. Though it was very dark around them, the light from inside the cart clearly showed that their clothes were ragged and torn, and there seemed to be fresh red bloodstains on them. At first he thought they must be hurt or had run into some kind of trouble, so he grew tense. But when he looked at their faces, he couldn't make them out at all. They were just dark, blurred patches. My husband's heart filled with terror because he knew they might not be human. He quickly lowered his head and kept packing as if nothing was wrong, moving as fast as he could. Then the man spoke again. "Do you have Japanese sake, cola, or milk tea?" My husband didn't dare look at them. Still trembling, he continued packing and answered softly, "I'm sorry, we're closed. Everything's sold out." After he spoke, he heard footsteps gradually moving away. Then, in an instant, the footsteps vanished completely. Although my husband had experienced a few inexplicable things when he was young, this was the first time he had come so close. The thought that he might encounter them again while doing business there filled him with fear. Before heading home that night, he stopped at a nearby convenience store to buy drinks and casually asked the young night shift clerk if anything bad had ever happened in that area. The clerk told him that when he was very little, the bodies of a family of 3 had been found deep in the woods nearby. They had been dumped in the bushes, and the killer had never been caught. My husband asked for the exact location and learned that the woods where the bodies were abandoned were right near where he had set up his cart. After learning all this, the next day my husband bought Japanese sake, cola, and milk tea and left them on the road beside that stretch of woods. In the years he continued doing business there, he never saw those 3 ghosts again. But sometimes at night, when he was alone in the cart packing up and the parking lot was completely empty, he would still hear the sound of 2 or 3 people walking on the gravel, passing right beside his cart. Whenever he heard those footsteps, he knew it was time to buy new Japanese sake, cola, and milk tea for them. This next terrifying experience happened when I was a sophomore in college. That spring, the school team organized a training camp. A group of us boarded the arranged bus and headed to the host school. On the bus, I overheard some local classmates saying that the old dormitory at that school had long been haunted and that people had terrifying experiences there. Hearing the rumor didn't feel great, but I was scared. When we arrived, the school assigned us to stay in that very old dormitory. One of the juniors who came with us asked around carefully and later told me that the haunted room was supposedly the one at the far left on the 4th floor. I thought it was nonsense, just a silly rumor. But when I checked my own room assignment and saw that I had been placed in the room at the far left on the 4th floor, I started to feel a little nervous. When my 3 roommates and I walked into the room and opened the wardrobe, we saw splatterminess like stains inside, as if some kind of liquid had sprayed against the walls. The sight sent a shiver through all of us. I felt a bit sick, but at the time I still didn't believe the rumors, and there were plenty of friends around, so I didn't pay much attention. Later that evening we fooled around with our classmates, then went to take showers together. By then I had completely forgotten about the ghost stories. After showering, a few of us sat eating snacks and watching ghost story videos until the early hours. Around 2 in the morning, everyone was tired and it was time to sleep, so we all got into bed. Our room had 2 bunk beds. I slept on the bottom bunk of the bed on the right side. After the lights went out, I closed my eyes and began to drift off. Just as I was about to fall asleep, I suddenly heard a strange, puffing kind of breathing sound. I thought someone was still awake and playing a prank, making weird snoring noises on purpose, so I ignored it. But the sound kept going. Before I knew it, the strange breathing had continued for a whole hour. Unable to sleep, I lay there listening and wondering who it was. I opened my eyes and looked across the aisle at the classmate sleeping on the bottom bunk opposite me. Even in the dim room, I could make out her shape. She had pulled the blanket completely over herself, leaving only her eyes exposed. She was staring straight at me, and I could see pure terror in her eyes. She gave me a meaningful look, signaling me to glance toward the foot of my bed, then quickly pulled the blanket up and buried her whole face inside it. I thought she wanted me to. The source text cuts off mid-sentence at the instruction is to continue seamlessly from the previous translated part. Previous part ended with the foot of my bed, then quickly pulled the blanket up and buried her whole face inside it. I thought she wanted me to. However, the provided source for this chunk starts with a different scene, indicating this is a new segment in the memoir. Since the system prompt requires continuing seamlessly and producing only the translated article text, I translate the new source material into polished, natural English while preserving the eerie tone, facts, sequence, and emotional intensity. I maintain consistent pronouns and details the white figure is male in this chunk based on no additions, notes, or branding. I carefully translated the entire provided source chunk into fluent narration minus ready English. I noticed a potential continuity issue with the previous chunks ending involving her burying face in blanket, but the source here shifts to a new scene with him the white shadow. Per rules, I preserve the original facts and sequence without forcing connections or adding bridging text. The translation starts directly with the new content for seamless flow in the overall article. Here's the polished translation. Why are you looking over there? So I slowly shifted my gaze toward the foot of my bed. The moment my peripheral vision swept across that area, I caught sight of a white shadow there. Even though I was terrified, I forced my eyes to focus completely on that white figure. Looking closely, it was a person dressed entirely in white. He stood motionless at the foot of my bed, facing me, and the heavy breathing was coming from him. At that moment, his upper body was blocked by the upper bunk, so I could only see his lower half. Still, I could feel that the thing was staring right back at me. I was genuinely frightened, but my eyes refused to leave the shadow. My instinct told me I had to keep watching him closely if he tried anything terrifying. I could react immediately, like running away. After staring at him for a while, he suddenly moved. He turned and walked toward the wardrobe, opened it, stepped inside, and then closed the door behind him. The second I saw him go in, I jumped out of bed and rushed to turn on the light. As soon as the light came on, the 3 people sharing the room with me also leapt up from their beds. It turned out they had all been kept awake by the same breathing sound. I suggested we open the wardrobe to check, but none of the 3 dared to do it. So I told them to just stand by the door while I checked myself. We agreed that if anything scary appeared, we would all run away together and not abandon anyone. Then, gathering my courage, I yanked the wardrobe door open in one swift motion. Inside, there was nothing but our luggage. After that, we pulled all the bags out, pushed a table in front of the wardrobe to block it, left the light on, and retreated to our beds. That night passed without further incident. During the rest of that training week, although none of us saw the thing appear again, we made sure never to stay alone in the room. Honestly, I barely slept at all that week because ever since I opened the wardrobe on the first day, I kept having the same nightmare every night. In the dream, I would walk over and open the wardrobe, and inside stood a figure in white whose face I couldn't see. The moment I opened the door, he would suddenly rush out, grab my face with hands that were impossibly large, and roar fiercely at me to get out of there. Later, on the bus, I told my classmates about what happened, but the seniors and juniors traveling with us didn't believe me. The 3 guys who shared the room with me, however, said they had also had dreams, though theirs were different from mine, and what was terrifying was that all 3 of them had almost identical nightmares. In their dreams, they were lying in their beds, hiding under the blankets, but their entire bodies were paralyzed. Then a white figure would open the wardrobe door, walk out, and come over to them. Suddenly, the thing would start pounding their stomachs with insane force and scream at them to get out of there. When I heard them describe their dreams, a chill ran down my spine. After that, terrified that we might have been cursed, the 4 of us went to a shrine together to pray for safety and peace. Nothing bad happened to us afterward, and everything went smoothly. Still, from that day on, I've always felt a bit of fear toward wardrobes. Every time I have to open one, I get tense, afraid that the moment I pull the door open, a white ghost will burst out, grab my face with its hand, and tell me to get out of there. As I was growing up, my grandmother lived just a 3-minute walk from my house. She stayed in a very old, run-down house and had been living there alone for a long time. In her house, one of the bedrooms had a wardrobe. Strange things seemed to happen with that wardrobe once a month, because every month my grandmother would ask my mother to come over and check it for her. She always said that the night before, she had heard a lot of noise coming from inside the wardrobe. Then one day, my grandmother called my mother again to help check the wardrobe, but my mother was extremely busy, so she asked me to go to my grandmother's house instead. When I walked into my grandmother's house and entered the bedroom where the wardrobe was, the scene before me shocked me. The room was in complete chaos, as if someone had emptied everything out of the wardrobe. All of my grandmother's clothes had been turned inside out and thrown on the floor. The boxes inside the wardrobe were open, and various items that had been stored there were scattered across the floor. It looked like a tornado had swept through just the wardrobe. Yet the rest of the house was perfectly tidy, with no signs of anyone rummaging through anything else. I asked my grandmother if it was always like this every month. She told me it had been happening for decades. At the time, I didn't think much of it and simply helped her pick everything up and put it back neatly into the wardrobe. After that, every month my grandmother would still regularly ask my mother to come check the wardrobe. But a few years later, my mother suddenly passed away. After her death, at my father's urging, my grandmother decided to move in with us. On the day, we helped move some of her already packed belongings to our house. My father suddenly asked me to go back to my grandmother's old house and fetch a certain document from the bedroom with the strange wardrobe. Reluctantly, I took the key and headed over to her place. When I arrived and stepped inside, it was the first time I had ever been alone in my grandmother's house. The empty rooms were filled with an unsettling atmosphere. That was the first time I had ever been alone in my grandmother's house. The empty rooms were filled with an unsettling atmosphere. Just as I was about to head upstairs, I heard a tremendous scratching sound coming from above. I told myself I must have misheard it and tried not to overthink, so I continued up the stairs anyway. Once I reached the second floor, I walked into the bedroom. I rummaged through a pile of cardboard boxes, searching for the documents. It took a lot of effort, but I finally found them. Right as I pulled the folder out and felt a wave of relief, a massive impact slammed against the wardrobe behind me. I jumped and frightened spun around instantly. The wardrobe doors were shaking violently, as if someone or something was locked inside and desperately trying to break free. Terror surged through me. I scrambled to my feet and bolted toward the bedroom door, desperate to escape. But the moment I reached it, the sliding door slammed shut with a deafening bang, closing on its own with brutal force. My heart nearly stopped. My hands and legs were trembling uncontrollably. Still, I grabbed the handle and yanked with all my strength, trying frantically to pull the door open. It wouldn't budge. I was trapped inside the room, and panic began to take over. While I kept struggling helplessly with the door, the wardrobe beside me erupted again, this time with something slamming against the inside at terrifying speed, over and over, like a monster fighting to burst out. I was convinced I was going to die right there. In that moment, I didn't care about anything else. I lifted my leg and kicked the door with every ounce of strength I had, smashing it open. I burst out of the room and raced down the stairs. Even as I ran, I could still hear the relentless pounding from the wardrobe, growing louder and more violent with every second. The entire house felt like it was shaking violently, teetering on the edge of exploding. I sprinted out of the house as fast as my legs could carry me, running all the way home like a frightened dog. When I finally reached the house, I was gasping for breath as I handed the folder to my father. He opened it, glanced at the contents, and said, "You brought the wrong one. Go back and get it again." I cursed silently in my head. I had nearly died of fright, and he wanted me to go back? It felt insane. Without thinking, I tossed the keys to him and said, "It's too terrifying. You go get it yourself." My father tilted his head and stared at me, still panting and drenched in sweat. At the time, he probably just thought I was being a strange kid. In the end, he said he would go himself in a few days. I never told anyone what happened that day. Afterward, whenever I helped my grandmother move things, I was always afraid, and I absolutely refused to enter that room alone ever again. On my suggestion, the wardrobe was eventually dismantled and thrown away as trash. Nothing else strange happened after that. It wasn't until recently, when my grandmother passed away and I returned to my father's house to sort through her belongings, that the memory came flooding back. It remains one of the most disturbing experiences of my life, and now there's no chance to uncover the truth behind it. All I know is that the wardrobe had apparently been given to my grandmother by someone else. Whether there was any story attached to it, I have no idea. To this day, I still wonder what was really causing those violent disturbances.